European businesses are not necessarily known for being competitive. But is that an accurate portrayal? And what should be done? What could be done? Well, INSEAD is actually launching a European competitiveness initiative to research that very topic. And joining us next on INSEAD Knowledge is the professor in charge of the initiative. He is INSEAD Strategy Professor Javier Gimeno. Thank you for being with us on INSEAD Knowledge.
It's a pleasure being here.
INSEAD has kind of a long-standing commitment to Europe. It was founded in Europe more than 50 years ago. It's global, but it has European roots. So what kind of commitment so far has INSEAD kind of made to Europe?
Well, it's been huge. I mean, Europe is very central for the identity of INSEAD. So many of our listeners probably know that we were founded 3 months after the Treaty of Rome that created the European Economic Community. And throughout the history, we have been the leaders in terms of developing a pan-European educational institution. We were leaders in offering executive programs in Europe. During the 1970s, when Europe was going through a crisis of confidence, a little bit like today, INSEAD was there to develop cases and understanding the situation, and also to help expand the European perspective. So we were very much involved on expanding a global perspective on Europe. So we had the Europe-Asia Center that allowed European companies to get more insights about opportunities outside Europe, as well as companies outside Europe to be able to do business in Europe.
One question comes to mind, why do we need this initiative? Aren't a lot of other people working on, my goodness, how can we be more competitive?
The unique perspective of INSEAD in this question is the business perspective. So there are many other research centers that focus on the economic, on the political dimension. What INSEAD brings to this picture is that we are very, very close to these European businesses, or to businesses, global businesses that are doing business in Europe. So we are able to leverage those contacts and those understanding to bring something new to the story.
So who do you think, or whom would be helped by the initiative? I mean, are you looking at just European businesses who could be helped, or who's the target audience for this?
It's not so much European businesses, but businesses based in Europe. And those could be owned by European capital, but it also could be operations of global multinationals that decide to establish operations in Europe. So one of our focus is understanding the competitiveness of basing business operations in the European region. The second target audience is policymakers, because in order to develop competitiveness, part of what is required is changes on economic and political institutions, regulations that will help the European economy to be a more effective base for these operations.
Like making it easier to get a business started. How do you define competitiveness?
Competitiveness means being able to create more value for society, more products, more services, with less resources, less capital, less people, and so on. The more competitive a company is, the more effective is creating this value relative to companies based in other parts of the world. So in order to assess competitiveness, we need to look at the European companies and how they stack relative to companies, let's say, in the US or China or India and so on. So it brings an outside-in perspective, focusing on the company's ability to create value. Now, one of the things that we want to avoid is getting into the debate about who should capture the benefits of the competitiveness. Should it be labor? Should it be capital? Should it be the government? If there are not competitive companies in Europe, nobody will be able to capture value. So by being competitive, everybody wins.
What specifically do you think you're going to do? What kind of output are you going to be having? Case studies, white papers, major motion pictures? What are you going to do?
So we have a variety of output and outlets. So we are planning a conference for next year where we will be able to present our results to our alumni community. We are going to develop a set of cases essentially to illustrate some of the most successful European companies and understand why they are successful. I mean, what are the dimensions that make them successful and how they leverage the European context. So we are also going to be engaged on publications, academic publications, not only within INSEAD, but also with partners from outside.
You mentioned that this conference that you plan for next year would be largely for alumni, but how else can alumni help, or how are you going to draw on the alumni network?
Oh, so we certainly expect to collaborate and get the support from the alumni. The first way in which they can help is facilitating access to some other companies. I mean, we have alumni that are placed in companies which are experiencing these issues of competitiveness. What I have found is that many of our alumni came to INSEAD precisely because it had this pan-European identity, especially for our earlier alumni. And this is what we want to make sure that is maintained. I mean, so even when there are doubts or concerns about the credibility of Europe, I mean there are people at INSEAD that will be there to see this in a dispassionate and objective way.
So why is INSEAD qualified to do this? What's our competitive advantage?
Well, there are three reasons why INSEAD is uniquely qualified to lead and to get engaged on this issue of European competitiveness. First is about our identity. We started as a pan-European school, so we are not particularly represented one country within the Europe or another. I mean, our faculty are very diverse. But for the last 20 or 30 years, we have been engaged in a process of globalization ourselves, which means that we can bring an outside-in perspective to the situation of Europe rather than one only purely based on the internal point of view. So we can look at Europe from outside as well as from different perspectives on the inside. The second is that we are a business school. A lot of the debate on competitiveness is led by either macroeconomists or political scientists, which have a particular angle to the question. But at the end of the day, competitiveness requires businesses that are themselves competitive. And what better than a business school to do that? So we want to bring the business dimension and how policies, regulation affects the well-being and the competitiveness of European companies through this interface. The third dimension is that INSEAD integrates both research and practice. So we are engaged daily with European companies, understand the context in which they are playing. So we want to leverage that combination of having one foot on the research world, one foot in the practical world to provide new insights.
Going beyond just the theory.
That's right.
Well, we look forward to seeing what you're going to be working on, and I'm sure we'll be talking with you on INSEAD Knowledge again. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Shelley.